Human history is often described as a story of constant progress, but scattered across the ancient world are discoveries that do not fit neatly into that narrative. Certain structures seem too ambitious for their age. Certain engineering achievements appear in places where the necessary knowledge should not have existed. In some cases, the builders vanished, leaving behind monuments that outlived their names, their language, and the methods used to create them. Generation tried to understand these remnants of the past, yet many of the most important questions remain unanswered. The mysteries in this video are reminders that not all knowledge moves forward, and that some chapters of human history may have been partially lost to time. Karahantepe is one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries of recent decades, yet it remains far less famous than many ancient sites that are thousands of years younger. Located in southeastern Turkey near Şanlıurfa, it forms part of the Taş Tepeler region, a network of prehistoric settlements that is transforming our understanding of early human history. Dating to roughly 9,500–8,500 BC, Karahantepe was built more than 11,000 years ago, long before metal tools, writing cities, or the great civilizations of Egypt and Mesopotamia. At a time when humans were thought to live mainly in small hunter-gatherer groups, the people of Karahantepe were carving monumental stone structures, creating sophisticated sculptures, and building ceremonial spaces unlike anything previously known from this era. Every new excavation season continues to reveal discoveries that challenge traditional ideas about how civilization began. Although the site was identified during surveys in the 1990s, it remained overshadowed for years by nearby Göbekli Tepe. That changed when major excavations expanded during the late 2010s and early 2020s. Archaeologists soon realized that Karahantepe was not simply another prehistoric settlement. Hidden beneath the ground were monumental pillars, carved chambers, stone sculptures, and ritual spaces so unusual that they raised entirely new questions about the beliefs and abilities of early humans. One of the most striking features of the site is its focus on human imagery. While many prehistoric sites emphasize animals, Karahantepe contains an extraordinary number of human representations. Excavators uncovered large stone heads emerging from bedrock, carved faces staring upward from ancient chambers, and life-size statues that rank among the oldest known human sculptures ever discovered. One famous statue depicts a seated male figure with pronounced facial features and hands positioned around the genital area. Its purpose remains unknown. Was it a deity, an ancestor, a ritual leader, or something else entirely? Without written records, archaeologists can only speculate, making these sculptures one of the site's enduring mysteries. The most extraordinary discovery lies underground. Archaeologists uncovered a large chamber carved directly into limestone bedrock. Inside stand a series of upright stone pillars arranged around the interior. Many of them have shapes that strongly resemble oversized phallic forms. At the center sits a carved human head emerging from the stone floor, creating one of the strangest ritual scenes ever found from the Neolithic period. The chamber immediately attracted worldwide attention because no one knows its true purpose. Some researchers believe it was connected to fertility rituals. Others suggest initiation ceremonies, ancestor worship, or social rites. Whatever its function, it represents a level of symbolic thinking far more complex than expected for this period of history. The engineering behind Karahantepe presents another mystery. Its builders cut chambers into solid rock, shaped massive stone pillars, and organized large construction projects requiring planning and cooperation. According to traditional theories, societies only became capable of such achievements after agriculture produced food surpluses and social hierarchies. Yet Karahantepe appears to belong to a time when farming was still developing. This raises a major question. How did people without fully developed agricultural societies organize the labor needed for such ambitious construction? Increasingly, archaeologists suspect that ritual and shared beliefs may have helped create complex societies rather than being a result of them. Excavations have also revealed evidence that Karahantepe was more than a ceremonial center. Archaeologists recovered stone tools, animal bones, domestic features, and traces of everyday activity. This suggests people lived here while simultaneously carrying out rituals and communal gatherings. Instead of separating daily life and religion, the inhabitants may have viewed them as part of the same world. Animal imagery appears throughout the site as well. Snakes, birds, wild cattle, and other creatures were carved into stone surfaces, echoing themes seen across the wider Tash Tepela region. These animals may have represented myths, spiritual forces, social identities, or seasonal cycles. Yet their meaning remains uncertain because the culture left no written explanations behind. Every carving appears to be part of a symbolic language that has largely been lost to time. Perhaps the most exciting mystery is that only a small portion of Karahantepe has been excavated. Large areas remain buried beneath the landscape, preserving structures that have not been seen for more than 11 millennia. Nearly every excavation season reveals new chambers, sculptures, and architectural features. Some researchers believe the most important discoveries may still lie underground, waiting to be uncovered. The significance of Karahantepe extends far beyond Turkey. For generations, historians believed agriculture came first, leading to permanent settlements, organized religion, and eventually civilization. Karahantepe suggests the process may have worked differently. Large gatherings, shared beliefs, and ceremonial traditions may have appeared before fully developed farming communities. If that interpretation is correct, monuments and rituals were not products of civilization. They were among the forces that helped create it. More than 11,000 years after its construction, Karahantepe remains filled with unanswered questions. Why were so many human faces carved into stone? What was the true purpose of the underground chamber? Who organized these massive projects, and what beliefs inspired them? Every new discovery provides clues, yet each clue creates new mysteries. That is what makes Karahantepe one of the strangest and most important ancient sites ever found. A place that continues to challenge everything we thought we knew about the dawn of civilization. Pecos Pueblo is one of the most important ancient settlements in North America, yet it remains one of the least known to the general public. Located in present-day New Mexico, the site was occupied for hundreds of years before European contact and eventually grew into a large pueblo community that played a crucial role in the history of the American Southwest. Archaeologists believe the settlement began around the 12th century and expanded steadily over the following centuries into a complex of multi-story adobe buildings housing hundreds and later thousands of people. Today, only weathered ruins remain, but beneath those ruins lies the story of a community that controlled major trade routes, connected distant cultures, and then mysteriously faded from power. The greatest mystery of Pecos Pueblo is not how it was built, but how a settlement located on the edge of the Great Plains became one of the most influential centers in the region, and why that influence eventually disappeared. The location of Pecos Pueblo was unlike most major ancient settlements. It was positioned near a natural passage through the mountains, creating a gateway between the Pueblo communities of the southwest and the nomadic groups of the Great Plains. This location gave Pecos access to people, goods, and ideas coming from multiple directions. Archaeological discoveries have revealed evidence of an enormous trade network passing through the settlement. Researchers have found turquoise, obsidian, pottery, shells, and other materials originating far from the site itself. Some items travelled hundreds of kilometres before reaching Pecos. Such discoveries suggest the settlement was not simply a farming village, but a major commercial centre linking different cultures across a vast area of North America. This trading role forms the first major mystery surrounding the site. Pecos was influential far beyond what its size alone would suggest. Unlike ancient empires that relied on military conquest, there is little evidence that Pecos controlled surrounding regions through force. Instead, archaeologists believe its power came from its position within regional trade networks. Exactly how the community maintained this influence remains unclear. Some researchers argue that Pecos acted as a neutral marketplace where different groups could exchange goods safely. Others believe the settlement controlled important travel routes that gave it economic advantages. Whatever the explanation, the scale of its influence continues to surprise archaeologists. The first Europeans to record Pecos Pueblo arrived in 1540 with the expedition of Spanish explorer Francisco Vázquez de Coronado. According to Spanish accounts, Pecos was one of the largest and most prosperous communities in the region. The settlement contained impressive multi-story structures and supported a substantial population. To the Spanish, it appeared to be a thriving center of commerce and culture. Yet these same records also mark the beginning of a dramatic decline that would eventually lead to the abandonment of the site. European contact brought diseases that spread rapidly through indigenous populations. Communities that had never been exposed to smallpox and other illnesses suffered devastating losses. At the same time, changing political conditions, warfare, environmental pressures, and colonial policies disrupted traditional life. Over the next 2 centuries, the population of Pecos steadily decreased. By the early 19th century, only a small number of residents remained. In 1838, the final inhabitants left the settlement and joined the people of Pecos Pueblo. After centuries of continuous occupation, Pecos became effectively abandoned. The exact reasons for this collapse remain one of the site's greatest mysteries. Disease certainly played a major role, but many archaeologists believe it cannot fully explain the disappearance of such an important community. Evidence suggests that periods of drought may have reduced agricultural productivity. Increasing conflict with plains groups may have weakened regional stability. Trade networks that once brought prosperity may have shifted elsewhere. Instead of a single cause, Pecos appears to have faced multiple crises over generations. The combination of these factors eventually overwhelmed a community that had survived for centuries. Among the most fascinating discoveries at Pecos are its ceremonial structures known as kivas. These circular chambers were central to religious life throughout the Pueblo world. Several kivas have been excavated at Pecos, revealing complex construction techniques and evidence of long-term ceremonial use. Some were rebuilt multiple times, suggesting they remained important for generations. Archaeologists have identified ventilation systems, ritual features, and carefully designed layouts, but many questions remain unanswered. The exact ceremonies conducted within these chambers are largely unknown. Much of the spiritual world of Pecos disappeared before it could be recorded in detail, leaving only architectural clues behind. Large-scale archaeological excavations began in the early 20th century under the direction of Alfred Vincent Kidder, one of the most influential archaeologists in American history. His work at Pecos transformed archaeological methods and produced an extraordinary amount of information about the settlement. Excavations uncovered thousands of artifacts, numerous buildings, and extensive burial areas. The discoveries revealed that Pecos had undergone centuries of growth, change, and adaptation. Yet the findings also raised new mysteries. Why were certain buildings expanded while others were abandoned? Why did some cultural practices change dramatically over time? How much influence came from neighboring communities? One of the most important discoveries involved human burials. Thousands of individuals were eventually documented, providing researchers with a rare opportunity to study an ancient population over a long period of time. Analysis of skeletal remains revealed changes in diet, health, and living conditions. More recent scientific studies have suggested that the population may have been more diverse than previously believed. Evidence indicates that people from different regions may have moved into Pecos over the centuries. This supports the idea that the settlement functioned as a crossroads where cultures mixed rather than as an isolated community. Another remarkable chapter in the history of Pecos involves the Pueblo Revolt of 1680. This uprising remains one of the most successful indigenous rebellions against European colonial rule in North America. Pecos participated in the coordinated effort that temporarily expelled Spanish authorities from much of the region. Historians continue to debate how communities separated by large distances managed to organize such a complex operation. Traditional accounts describe messages being carried between settlements using knotted cords to count down the days until the revolt. Whether this system alone explains the level of coordination remains uncertain. The event demonstrates that Pecos was part of a much larger network of communication and cooperation than many early observers realized. The architecture of Pecos Pueblo provides additional clues about its importance. At its height, the settlement consisted of hundreds of interconnected rooms arranged in large residential blocks. Construction occurred over generations, creating a complex landscape of old and new structures. Some buildings were enlarged repeatedly, while others were deliberately abandoned. Archaeologists believe these changes reflect shifts in population, social organization, and religious practices. However, many details remain unclear. The original functions of several structures are still debated, and researchers continue to investigate how the community was organized internally. Chaco Canyon is one of the greatest archaeological mysteries in North America. Located in the desert of present-day New Mexico, it was the center of the Chacoan culture between roughly AD 850 and 1150. At its peak, the canyon contained some of the largest buildings ever constructed north of Mexico before European contact. Massive stone complexes known as Great Houses dominated the landscape, the most famous being Pueblo Bonito, a structure containing more than 600 rooms and several stories in height. The scale of construction was extraordinary, especially considering the harsh environment. Rainfall was limited, farmland was scarce, and natural resources were relatively poor. Yet for more than 3 centuries, people invested enormous amounts of labor into transforming this remote canyon into one of the most important centers in the ancient Southwest. Archaeologists first began seriously studying the ruins during the late 19th century and were immediately confronted by a difficult question. Why was such a large center built here at all? Most major ancient civilizations developed beside rivers, fertile valleys, or major trade routes. Chaco Canyon offered none of these advantages. Excavations throughout the 20th century only deepened the mystery. Researchers discovered sophisticated masonry, carefully planned architecture, extensive trade networks, and evidence of social organization on a scale few had expected. The canyon seemed to function as the heart of a much larger regional system, but exactly how that system worked remains debated today. One of the most impressive aspects of Chaco was the construction effort itself. The great houses required huge quantities of timber, yet large forests do not exist within the canyon. Scientific analysis of wooden beams showed that many came from mountain ranges more than 70 kilometers away. Tens of thousands of trees were cut and transported across difficult terrain. Without wheeled vehicles or large draft animals, every beam would have needed to be moved by human labor. The logistical challenge was enormous. The fact that such a project was completed suggests a highly organized society capable of coordinating thousands of workers over generations. The most famous mystery of Chaco Canyon, however, is its road system. During the 20th century, aerial photography revealed a network of ancient roads spreading outward from the canyon in multiple directions. Some roads were nearly 9 meters wide and stretched for dozens of kilometers. What puzzled archaeologists was that many did not appear to connect major settlements, water sources, or agricultural areas. Some even continued straight across difficult terrain instead of following easier routes. The strangest example is the Great North Road, a route extending toward the horizon with no obvious destination. Researchers have proposed that these roads were ceremonial pathways, pilgrimage routes, or symbolic features connected to religious beliefs. Others argue they may have linked communities that have not yet been discovered. Despite decades of research, no explanation fully accounts for their unusual design. Another mystery involves astronomy. Many Chacoan structures appear aligned with important solar and lunar events. Researchers have identified architectural orientations connected to solstices, equinoxes, and the complex 18.6-year lunar cycle. The most famous example is found at Fajada Butte, where sunlight passing between rock slabs illuminates spiral carvings during key moments of the year. Known as the sun dagger, the phenomenon demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of celestial movements. Such precision raises important questions. Why was astronomy so important to the people of Chaco? Was it used to regulate agriculture, organize ceremonies, legitimize political authority, or all three? No one knows for certain. The purpose of Chaco Canyon itself remains controversial. For many years, archaeologists viewed it as a large city occupied by thousands of permanent residents. More recent research has challenged that idea. Some scholars now believe the resident population may have been relatively small and that the canyon functioned primarily as a ceremonial center. Under this interpretation, people from across the Southwest traveled to Chaco for rituals, gatherings, trade, and political events. The enormous great kivas found throughout the canyon support this theory because they appear designed for large communal activities rather than everyday life. If this interpretation is correct, Chaco may have been one of the largest pilgrimage destinations in prehistoric North America. One of the most important discoveries in recent years came from genetic analysis. In 2017, researchers studied DNA from individuals buried in a special crypt beneath Pueblo Bonito. The results showed that several elite individuals belonged to the same maternal family line over a period of roughly 330 years. This was a remarkable finding because it provided strong evidence for hereditary leadership. Rather than being governed by loosely organized communities, Chaco may have been controlled by an elite dynasty whose influence lasted for centuries. The discovery changed how archaeologists think about power in the ancient Southwest. Yet it also created new mysteries. How much authority did this ruling family possess? Did they control trade, religion, or both? And how far did their influence extend beyond the canyon? Evidence suggests that Chaco's influence reached far beyond its immediate surroundings. More than 100 great houses have been identified across the broader region, many sharing architectural features with structures in the canyon itself. Exotic goods found at Chaco include turquoise, marine shells, macaw feathers, and cacao residues imported from distant regions. The presence of cacao was particularly surprising because it originated hundreds of kilometers to the south in Mesoamerica. These discoveries indicate long-distance connections that linked Chaco to a much wider world. Exactly how those relationships functioned remains unclear, but they demonstrate that the canyon was far from isolated. Then, sometime during the 12th century, the system began to unravel. Construction slowed, populations declined, and many major buildings were abandoned. Tree ring studies show that severe drought affected the region during this period, making agriculture increasingly difficult. Yet drought alone may not explain the collapse. Other societies have survived similar environmental challenges. Some researchers believe political instability weakened the system. Others suggest social tensions emerged as resources became scarcer. Another possibility is that religious authority began to fail, undermining the leadership structure that held the region together. Whatever the cause, Chaco's era of dominance came to an end surprisingly quickly. Eski-Kermen is one of the most unusual ancient settlements ever carved into stone. Perched on a flat-topped limestone plateau in southwestern Crimea, the city emerged during the Byzantine period, most likely in the 6th century AD, when the Eastern Roman Empire was strengthening its defences across the northern Black Sea region. At first glance, Eski-Kermen appears to be little more than a rocky mesa rising above the surrounding valleys, but hidden within its cliffs is an entire world cut directly into the stone. More than 350 artificial caves have been identified across the site, creating a vast underground network of homes, storage chambers, workshops, religious spaces, defensive positions, and passageways. Unlike many ancient cave settlements that evolved gradually from natural caverns, most of Eski-Kermen was deliberately excavated by human hands, transforming an isolated plateau into a fortified city that survived for centuries before vanishing almost completely from history. The city occupied a naturally defensible position. Steep cliffs protected nearly every side of the plateau, leaving only a few narrow approaches through which visitors or invading armies could enter. Archaeological investigations have shown that the settlement was not merely a collection of caves, but a thriving urban centre. Stone houses once stood on the plateau above the cave complexes. Streets connected different districts. Churches served the local population, and agricultural lands stretched across the nearby valleys. Scholars estimate that several thousand people may have lived here during its peak. Yet despite its importance, Eski-Kermen remains far less famous than other ancient rock-cut cities, making it one of the most overlooked mysteries of the medieval world. The first major mystery begins with the caves themselves. Many chambers clearly served practical purposes. Some contain feeding troughs and indicate the keeping of animals. Others include storage pits, shelves carved into walls, or evidence of food processing. However, dozens of caves continue to puzzle researchers. Certain rooms feature carefully shaped stone benches, unusual niches, and channels cut into the floor whose purpose remains uncertain. Some chambers appear too elaborate to function as simple storage spaces, but lack the features expected in homes or churches. Archaeologists have proposed numerous explanations ranging from workshops and administrative offices to ritual spaces, yet no consensus has emerged. Even after decades of study, parts of the city remain functionally anonymous, frozen in stone but silent about their original purpose. Among the most fascinating discoveries are the religious structures hidden within the cliffs. Several cave churches have been identified throughout the settlement, revealing that Christianity played a central role in the community's life. One church contains carved architectural details and traces of decorative elements that suggest that it once held considerable importance. Another preserves burial chambers and evidence of repeated religious use over generations. These discoveries indicate that Eski-Kermen was more than a military outpost. It was a living community with spiritual traditions, local institutions, and connections to the wider Byzantine world. Yet historical records describing the people who lived here are surprisingly scarce. We know the churches existed, we know thousands of people occupied the plateau, but the identities, languages, and daily lives of many residents remain frustratingly obscure. The city's defensive system presents another remarkable mystery. Excavations have revealed a settlement seemingly designed to withstand attack. Observation points were carved into strategic positions overlooking the surrounding landscape. Defensive walls once guarded key entrances. Narrow access routes could easily be controlled by a relatively small number of defenders. Some cave complexes appear specifically engineered for military purposes, including chambers overlooking approaches to the city. The question is why such extensive defences were considered necessary. During the early medieval period, Crimea stood at the crossroads of numerous powers including Byzantines, Khazars, steppe nomads, and later various Turkic groups. Eski-Kermen may have been constructed as a response to this unstable frontier environment, but the scale of its fortifications suggests that its inhabitants anticipated serious threats. The city seems to have been built with siege warfare in mind, as though danger was not an occasional possibility, but a constant expectation. Perhaps the most impressive feature discovered by archaeologists is the city's water system. Water is the fundamental challenge for any settlement located atop a rocky plateau. Without a reliable supply, even the strongest fortress becomes vulnerable. For years, researchers wondered how Eski-Kermen sustained its population. Excavations eventually revealed one of the site's most extraordinary engineering achievements, a deep siege well carved directly into the bedrock. Reached through a steep staircase descending into the cliff, the well provided access to groundwater even during prolonged blockades. The amount of labour required to create such a structure was enormous. Workers had to remove vast quantities of stone while maintaining the stability of the surrounding rock. The existence of this well demonstrates advanced planning and significant organisational capacity, yet it also raises another mystery. Who possessed the authority and resources to coordinate such a massive project in this relatively remote region? Modern archaeological research has gradually uncovered more details about the city. Investigations during the 20th century documented residential districts, churches, defensive structures, and extensive cave networks. Excavators recovered ceramics, metal tools, household objects, and religious artifacts that helped reconstruct life within the settlement. These finds revealed a community engaged in agriculture, trade, craftsmanship, and regional exchange. Imported goods indicate connections extending beyond the immediate area, suggesting that Eski-Kermen was integrated into broader economic networks. At the same time, evidence of local production demonstrates a degree of self-sufficiency. The city was not an isolated refuge, but an active participant in the medieval world. Yet the greatest mystery surrounding Eski-Kermen concerns its destruction. Archaeological evidence points toward a catastrophic end during the late 13th century. Layers of burning, collapsed structures, and abandoned possessions suggest a sudden and violent event rather than a gradual decline. Many historians associate this destruction with the campaigns of the Mongol commander Nogai Khan, whose forces operated across Crimea during this period. According to this interpretation, Eski-Kermen was overwhelmed during a military campaign and never recovered. The evidence appears compelling, but questions remain. Why was the city abandoned so completely afterward? Other settlements devastated by warfare were often rebuilt. Eski-Kermen, however, seems to have entered a long silence. The population disappeared, the streets fell empty, and nature gradually reclaimed the plateau. A place that had endured for centuries effectively vanished from history. This disappearance contributes to the site's haunting atmosphere today. Visitors encounter hundreds of empty chambers cut into silent cliffs, remnants of churches whose congregations are long gone, and defensive works that no longer guard anything. Unlike famous ancient cities that left extensive written records, Eski-Kermen survives primarily through archaeology. Stone preserves the physical traces of its inhabitants, but their voices have largely been lost. Every excavation answers one question while creating several more. Why were certain caves designed in unusual ways? How exactly was the city governed? What cultural groups formed its population over the centuries? What events unfolded during its final days? And why did such an impressive settlement fade so completely from historical memory? What makes Eski-Kermen especially compelling is that its mystery is grounded not in legend, but in tangible evidence. The caves are real, the churches are real, the siege well is real, the destruction layers are real. Archaeologists can walk through the city's streets and document its structures, yet fundamental aspects of its history remain uncertain. The result is a rare kind of ancient mystery, one built not on speculation but on the gaps that still exist between what survives in stone and what has been lost in time. More than 1,000 years after its creation and centuries after its abandonment, Eski-Kermen continues to challenge researchers, standing as a forgotten city carved into a mountain and a reminder of how entire communities disappear while leaving only fragments behind for future generations to decipher. Kalavantin Durg is one of the most extraordinary mountain fortifications in India, standing atop a narrow basalt pinnacle in the western Ghats of Maharashtra. Rising approximately 686 meters above sea level, the site overlooks ancient routes that once connected the Konkan coast with the interior Deccan Plateau. Today, it is famous for a staircase carved directly into the mountainside, a structure so dramatic that many visitors initially assume it must be a modern creation. Yet despite its growing popularity, the true history of Kalavantin remains surprisingly uncertain. No surviving inscription identifies its builders, no detailed record explains its construction, and no contemporary document reveals exactly why such an immense effort was devoted to a summit that appears almost impossible to reach. Most historians believe Kalavantin was connected to the nearby hill fortress of Prabalgad, a strategic stronghold that controlled trade and military movement through the region. Various kingdoms occupied the area over the centuries, including the Yadavas, Bahmani rulers, and later the Marathas. Historical sources suggest that Prabalgad played an important military role, but Kalavantin itself remains far more mysterious. Unlike many famous forts that contain palaces, temples, inscriptions, or extensive ruins, Kalavantin offers remarkably little evidence regarding its original purpose. What survives is the mountain, the staircase, and a series of unanswered questions. The feature that makes Kalavantin famous is its incredible rock-cut stairway. Hundreds of steps snake upward along the exposed cliff face, following the natural contours of the basalt pinnacle. In several places, the path narrows dramatically, leaving sheer drops on both sides. Even today, the climb is considered dangerous, especially during the monsoon season when the stone becomes slippery. Modern visitors often require extreme caution to reach the summit. This immediately raises a fascinating question. If climbing the mountain is difficult with modern footwear and equipment, how did medieval builders carve hundreds of precise steps into solid rock while suspended on such steep terrain? The challenge becomes even more remarkable when the geology of the site is considered. Kalavantin consists largely of basalt, an extremely hard volcanic rock formed millions of years ago during the eruptions that created the Deccan Traps. Basalt is durable and resistant to weathering, but it is also difficult to cut. Every step visible today required workers to remove large quantities of stone using hand tools. Archaeologists and historians can see the finished result, but the construction process itself remains largely unknown. There are no surviving descriptions explaining how workers reached the upper sections of the pinnacle during excavation, how materials were transported, or how accidents were prevented. The staircase stands as evidence of a major engineering project whose methods have largely vanished from history. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding Kalavantin is the question of purpose. Many forts across India were designed to support garrisons, store supplies, and withstand lengthy sieges. Kalavantin appears different. The summit area is relatively small compared to major military forts. This has led some researchers to suggest that the pinnacle may have served as an observation point rather than a primary fortress. From the top, enormous stretches of surrounding countryside become visible. Watchmen stationed there could have detected approaching armies or monitored movement along trade routes far below. Such a role would explain the strategic location, but it does not entirely explain the extraordinary effort required to carve the staircase. Another theory proposes that Kalavantin functioned as a final defensive refuge connected to Prabalgad. In times of invasion, defenders may have retreated to the pinnacle after lower fortifications fell. The steep approach would have made any assault extremely difficult. Yet this explanation also leaves important questions unanswered. The summit lacks clear evidence of the infrastructure normally associated with long-term occupation. Water storage, shelter, and supply systems appear limited compared to what would be expected for a fortress intended to hold large numbers of people. A more intriguing possibility is that Kalavantin carried symbolic or ceremonial significance. Throughout history, difficult-to-reach mountaintops have often been associated with authority, prestige, or religious activities. Reaching such places required effort, endurance, and commitment. The journey itself could have been meaningful. While no direct evidence currently confirms ritual use at Kalavantin, the unusual nature of the site has encouraged speculation that its importance extended beyond purely military functions. The problem is that archaeology has yet to uncover enough material evidence to confirm any single interpretation. The broader region around Kalavantin has provided important clues about the site's history. Surveys and archaeological work conducted around Prabalgad have revealed fortification remains, water reservoirs, defensive walls, and traces of long-term occupation. These discoveries confirm that the surrounding mountains formed part of a significant strategic landscape. Control of elevated positions was essential for kingdoms competing to dominate Western India. However, while the regional context is becoming clearer, Kalavantin itself continues to resist simple explanations. Archaeologists understand why the area mattered. They still struggle to explain why this particular pinnacle was transformed into such an extreme architectural achievement. The mystery is amplified by the absence of written evidence. Across the ancient and medieval world, rulers often celebrated major construction projects through inscriptions or official records. Such documents help historians understand who built a structure, when it was built, and why it was important. Kalavantin offers none of these advantages. The staircase survives, but the identities of the people responsible have disappeared almost completely. Their tools are gone, their records are gone, their motivations remain uncertain. The result is a rare situation in which the engineering achievement is obvious, but the human story behind it has largely vanished. Modern drone photography has only increased fascination with the site. Images captured from above reveal how improbable the staircase truly is. The steps appear to cling to the side of a giant stone needle rising from the landscape. Viewed from certain angles, the structure seems almost impossible, more like something imagined fiction than a genuine historical monument. Yet every step is real, every cut was made by human hands, and every section represents labor performed centuries before modern machinery existed. Unlike many historical mysteries that rely on legends or supernatural claims, the mystery of Kalavantin is rooted in reality. The unanswered questions are practical rather than mythical. Who designed the staircase? Which kingdom financed the project? How many workers participated? How long did construction take? What exact role did the summit serve within the wider defensive network? These questions remain open because the available evidence is incomplete. Beit Catacombs is one of the most unusual archaeological sites ever discovered in the ancient world. Located in the Lower Galilee region of northern Israel, the site began as a Jewish town during the Hellenistic period and continued to flourish under Roman rule. At first glance, there is little to suggest that it was different from countless other settlements scattered across the eastern Mediterranean nearly 2,000 years ago. Above ground, the remains consist of houses, public buildings, streets, and fortifications typical of the period. The true mystery, however, lies beneath the surface. Hidden under the limestone hills is a vast underground necropolis containing dozens of interconnected catacombs, hundreds of chambers, and thousands of burials. What makes Beit She'arim extraordinary is not simply its size, but the astonishing role it came to play in the ancient world. Somehow, a relatively modest town became one of the most desired burial destinations in the Roman Empire, attracting the dead from places hundreds and even thousands of kilometers away. The question that still fascinates archaeologists today is simple. Why did so many people go to such extraordinary lengths to be buried here? The story begins in the 2nd century AD, during a turbulent period in Jewish history. Following the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans in AD 70 and the failure of the Bar Kokhba revolt in AD 135, Jewish religious and political life shifted northward into Galilee. During this period, Beit Shearim became associated with one of the most influential figures in Judaism, Rabbi Judah Hanasi, the scholar traditionally credited with compiling the Mishnah, one of the foundational texts of Rabbinic Judaism. Historical sources indicate that he lived in the town and was buried there around AD 220. What happened afterward appears almost unprecedented. Within a relatively short period, Beit Shearim transformed into a sacred burial center whose reputation spread across the Jewish diaspora. Wealthy families, religious leaders, merchants and pilgrims from distant regions began transporting their remains to this small settlement. The phenomenon became so widespread that some historians have compared it to a form of ancient religious tourism centered not on the living but on the dead. The scale of the underground cemetery remained unknown until the 20th century. In 1936, a member of a local kibbutz accidentally discovered one of the entrances while exploring the hillside. The find led to systematic excavations directed by Israeli archaeologist Benjamin Mazar beginning in the late 1930s. What emerged from the darkness shocked researchers. Instead of isolated tombs, they found an enormous network of catacombs carved directly into the bedrock. Some chambers contained dozens of stone sarcophagi. Others opened into large halls supported by pillars. Long corridors twisted through the hill, connecting burial rooms that had remained sealed for centuries. To date, more than 30 catacomb systems have been identified, though archaeologists believe additional sections may still remain undiscovered. One of the most remarkable aspects of the site is the sheer diversity of the people buried there. Inscriptions found throughout the catacombs reveal names and origins from across the Mediterranean world. Some individuals came from Phoenician cities such as Tyre and Sidon. Others arrived from Syria, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Arabia. The inscriptions appear in multiple languages including Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, and Palmyrene. This linguistic mixture provides direct evidence that Beit Shearim served an international community. In some chambers, the inscriptions read almost like a map of the ancient world. Few cemeteries from the Roman period contain such a broad representation of distant populations. The discovery raises a fascinating mystery. Transporting a body over long distances in antiquity was difficult, expensive, and often dangerous. Why were so many families willing to undertake such a journey merely to secure a burial place beneath these hills? The most widely accepted explanation centers on the burial of Judah Hanasi. Many scholars believe that his tomb transformed Beit Shearim into a sacred destination whose prestige spread throughout Jewish communities abroad. Being buried near such a revered figure may have been viewed as spiritually beneficial or socially prestigious. Yet the evidence is far from complete. No tomb has been conclusively identified as belonging to Judah Hanasi. Ancient traditions point toward several possibilities, but none have been definitively proven. Ironically, the man whose presence may have created the entire necropolis remains one of its great mysteries. Archaeologists know that thousands came because of the site's sacred reputation, but the precise origin of that reputation remains elusive. Another surprising feature of the catacombs is their artwork. Visitors expecting simple religious burials often encounter something entirely different. The stone sarcophagi are decorated with elaborate carvings including lions, eagles, wreaths, geometric patterns, mythological motifs, and architectural designs inspired by Greco-Roman culture. One of the most striking discoveries was the appearance of Medusa imagery, a figure from Greek mythology traditionally associated with protection and the warding off of evil. The presence of such imagery inside a Jewish necropolis has generated decades of debate. Some researchers argue that these symbols had lost their original pagan meaning and had become purely decorative. Others suggest they reflect the cultural blending that characterized Jewish communities living under Roman rule. Whatever the explanation, the artwork challenges simplistic assumptions about ancient religious identities and reveals a world far more interconnected than many imagine. The catacombs also contain evidence of immense wealth. Many of the stone sarcophagi weigh several tons and required considerable labor to carve, transport, and install. Some chambers were carefully planned and decorated on a monumental scale. The investment of resources is difficult to ignore. Above ground, Beit Shearim was never one of the largest cities in the region. Yet below ground, the necropolis rivals some of the most ambitious burial complexes of the Roman world. This imbalance has puzzled archaeologists for decades. It appears that the town's true importance was not as a centre of commerce or politics, but as a destination for the dead. In effect, the economy and reputation of the settlement may have become tied to burial activity itself. Excavations have uncovered countless personal stories hidden within the chambers. Inscriptions reveal references to community leaders, merchants, scholars, and entire families. Some epitaphs express grief and affection in surprisingly emotional language. Others record places of origin that help reconstruct ancient migration networks. Together they provide a rare glimpse into the lives of people scattered across the Roman Empire. The catacombs function almost like a time capsule, preserving connections between communities separated by great distances, but united through shared cultural and religious traditions. Not every mystery at Beit has been solved. Many sections of the necropolis remain only partially explored. Some chambers were looted in antiquity, leaving behind unanswered questions about their original contents. Archaeologists continue to debate the exact chronology of different catacomb systems, and whether the complex expanded according to a central plan or developed gradually over generations. There is also uncertainty regarding the full population buried there. While thousands of interments have been documented, estimates vary significantly, and some researchers believe the actual number may have been much higher than currently known. El Paraiso is one of the oldest and most enigmatic monumental complexes ever discovered in the Americas. Located in the Chillon Valley near modern-day Lima, Peru, the site was occupied between roughly 3000 and 1800 BC, making it contemporary with some of the earliest pyramids of ancient Egypt and among the oldest large-scale ceremonial centres in the New World. Covering more than 50 hectares and consisting of at least a dozen major structures, El Paraiso challenges long-standing assumptions about how early civilizations developed in South America. Unlike later cultures such as the Inca, the people who built El Paraiso left no written records, no known kings, and no clear historical tradition. Yet they organized massive construction projects requiring enormous amounts of labor, planning, and resources. The result is a sprawling complex that appears unexpectedly sophisticated for its age, raising one of archaeology's most intriguing questions. Who built El Paraiso and why? The site first attracted scholarly attention during the 20th century, but extensive investigations did not begin until the 1960s when archaeologists recognized its true scale. What they found was astonishing. El Paraiso was not a simple village or isolated temple. It consisted of huge platform mounds, large plazas, ceremonial spaces, storage areas, and interconnected architectural compounds. Some structures stretched hundreds of meters in length, at a time when many societies elsewhere in the world were still relatively small agricultural communities. The inhabitants of El Paraiso were already constructing monumental architecture on a remarkable scale. Yet despite decades of research, archaeologists still struggle to explain the exact function of the complex. Was it a city, a ceremonial centre, a political headquarters, or something entirely different? One of the most fascinating aspects of El Paraiso is that it emerged during a period when the Peruvian coast was undergoing dramatic social change. Evidence suggests that its inhabitants relied on a combination of agriculture and marine resources. Cotton, beans, squash, and other crops were cultivated inland, while fish and shellfish were obtained from the nearby Pacific coast. This economic system may have provided the surplus needed to support large construction projects. However, the mystery lies not in how they survived, but in why they invested such extraordinary effort into building monumental structures. The complex required coordinated labour from hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people. Such organisation implies a level of social complexity that archaeologists are still trying to understand. The site's greatest mystery emerged dramatically in 2013 when archaeologists uncovered what became known as the Fire Temple. Hidden within one of the pyramidal structures, the discovery revealed a ceremonial chamber unlike anything previously found at El Paraiso. The room contained a square altar at its centre, evidence of repeated burning events, and walls coated with carefully prepared yellow clay. Archaeologists found traces of charcoal, ash, and offerings that suggested ritual activities had taken place there for generations. The discovery immediately transformed interpretations of the site. Rather than functioning solely as an administrative or residential center, El Paraiso now appeared to possess a deeply ceremonial purpose. The fire temple hinted at religious practices whose meaning has been lost for nearly 5,000 years. What makes the fire temple particularly intriguing is the level of care invested in its construction and maintenance. The repeated use of fire appears to have been deliberate and symbolic rather than practical. Some researchers believe the chamber served as a sacred space where rituals connected communities across the region. Others suggest it may have been associated with elite religious specialists who controlled access to ceremonial knowledge, yet no consensus exists. Unlike many later civilizations, the builders left no inscriptions, no sculptures depicting gods, and no written explanations of their beliefs. The altar continues to raise more questions than answers. Another enduring mystery concerns the unusual architectural practices observed throughout the complex. Excavations have revealed that certain rooms and structures were intentionally buried beneath layers of stone and fill material. In many cases, these spaces were not destroyed by natural disasters or warfare. Instead, they appear to have been deliberately sealed before new construction was built above them. This pattern has been documented at several ancient Peruvian sites, but its purpose remains uncertain. Some archaeologists interpret it as a ritual act similar to retiring a sacred building after its ceremonial life had ended. Others see it as evidence of changing political authority or shifting religious traditions. Whatever the explanation, the repeated burial of perfectly usable structures suggests that the builders viewed architecture as something more than mere construction. Buildings may have possessed symbolic or spiritual significance that required formal closure before replacement. Excavations have also uncovered evidence of sophisticated planning. The orientation of structures appears intentional, and some researchers have proposed possible astronomical alignments linked to seasonal events. Although many of these theories remain debated, they add another layer to the mystery. If El Paraiso functioned partly as a ceremonial center, knowledge of celestial cycles may have played a role in its rituals and agricultural calendar. Similar patterns are seen in other ancient societies around the world. Yet the exact significance of these alignments at El Paraiso remains unresolved. The relationship between El Paraiso and other early Peruvian centers is equally intriguing. The site existed during the same broad era as the ancient city of Caral, often regarded as the oldest known civilization in the Americas. Both locations demonstrate that complex societies emerged on the Peruvian coast thousands of years before many people realize. Some scholars believe these centers were connected through trade networks, shared religious traditions, or cultural exchange. Others argue that they developed independently while responding to similar environmental conditions. The lack of definitive evidence has left the nature of this relationship open to debate, creating another puzzle at the heart of Peru's earliest history. The Taj fortified Oasis settlement is one of the most intriguing ancient sites hidden within the vast deserts of the Arabian Peninsula. At first glance, it appears to be little more than the remains of walls, towers, and abandoned buildings scattered around a precious source of water. Yet beneath those ruins lies evidence of a society that managed to survive, prosper, and defend itself in an environment where permanent settlement should have been nearly impossible. Located within a region dominated by extreme heat, scarce rainfall, and shifting sands, the settlement formed around an oasis that served as a lifeline for both local inhabitants and travelers crossing the desert. Archaeological evidence suggests that the site flourished during a period when long-distance trade routes connected southern Arabia with Mesopotamia, the Levant, and beyond. What makes the settlement remarkable is not simply its existence, but the enormous effort invested in fortifying and organizing a community in a landscape that appears hostile to large-scale habitation. The earliest investigations of the site revealed a complex arrangement of defensive walls surrounding cultivated land and residential zones. Unlike many ancient settlements that relied on rivers or fertile valleys, the people of Taj built their community around a limited and fragile water source. Archaeologists quickly realized that the settlement was not a temporary encampment, but a carefully planned oasis center. Thick defensive walls enclosed large portions of the inhabited area, suggesting that protection was considered essential from the very beginning. The question that immediately emerged was simple but fascinating. Who were they defending themselves against? The desert was not empty. Ancient Arabia was crossed by merchants, nomadic tribes, caravans, and competing regional powers. Yet the scale of the fortifications implies a level of concern that may have extended far beyond ordinary raids. Some researchers believe the walls protected valuable agricultural land and water supplies. Others suggest they may have served as symbols of authority, marking control over one of the most precious resources in the desert. As excavations expanded, archaeologists uncovered evidence of sophisticated water management systems. This discovery transformed the settlement from a simple fortified village into a genuine mystery of ancient engineering. The survival of a large population in such an arid environment required more than a natural spring. Researchers found traces of irrigation channels, storage facilities, and agricultural zones carefully organized around the oasis. Every drop of water appears to have been managed with extraordinary precision. The settlement demonstrates a level of environmental adaptation that rivals some of the most famous hydraulic civilizations of the ancient world. Yet unlike Egypt, Mesopotamia, or the Indus Valley, the people of Taj achieved this without the benefit of a major river. The ability to sustain crops, livestock, and permanent residences in the middle of the desert remains one of the site's most impressive achievements. One of the most interesting aspects of the settlement is its position within broader trade networks. Ancient Arabia occupied a strategic location between Africa and the Mediterranean world. Caravans carrying incense, aromatics, precious stones, metals, and luxury goods crossed the region for centuries. The oasis likely functioned as a crucial stop along these routes. Archaeological finds indicate contact with distant cultures, suggesting that Taj was not an isolated outpost but part of a much larger economic system. This raises another mystery. If the settlement occupied such an advantageous position, why was it eventually abandoned? Many ancient cities declined because of war, environmental collapse, or economic disruption. Yet no single explanation fully accounts for the disappearance of the community. The fortifications remained, the oasis continued to exist, but the people eventually left. Climate change has emerged as one possible answer. Scientific studies across Arabia have revealed that environmental conditions shifted dramatically throughout antiquity. Regions that once supported larger populations gradually became drier, water sources shrank, agricultural productivity declined, and communities were forced to adapt or relocate. Some researchers argue that the abandonment of fortified oasis settlements reflects these broad climatic transformations. Others point out that human societies often survive environmental stress for centuries. If climate alone were responsible, why did some settlements disappear while others endured? The evidence suggests that multiple factors may have interacted, creating a slow process of decline rather than a sudden collapse. The defensive architecture presents another unresolved puzzle. Excavations revealed substantial walls that required considerable labor and resources to construct. Building such structures in a desert environment would have demanded coordination, planning, and social organization. This suggests the existence of a powerful local authority capable of mobilizing large numbers of people. Yet archaeologists still know surprisingly little about the political system governing the settlement. Was it controlled by a local elite, a tribal confederation, a regional kingdom? The physical remains demonstrate authority and organization, but written records are scarce. As a result, much of the settlement's social structure remains hidden behind the walls its inhabitants left behind. Perhaps the strangest mystery surrounding the site is what it reveals about ancient Arabia itself. For generations, deserts were often imagined as empty spaces separating major civilizations. Modern archaeology has dramatically changed that perception. Fortified oasis settlements like Taj demonstrate that the Arabian Peninsula supported complex communities, trade networks, engineering projects, and political systems long before many historians once believed. The site challenges traditional narratives by showing that deserts were not barriers to civilization but environments where unique forms of civilization emerged. The people who lived here developed strategies for survival that were perfectly adapted to their surroundings. They transformed a fragile oasis into a thriving center of human activity and maintained it for centuries. Recent archaeological research has further expanded interest in fortified oasis settlements across Arabia. Surveys using satellite imagery Aerial photography and modern excavation techniques have revealed networks of walled oases scattered throughout the region. Some share similarities with Taj, suggesting that the settlement may have been part of a larger pattern rather than an isolated phenomenon. This discovery raises new questions about communication, cooperation, and culture exchange among desert communities. Were these settlements connected politically? Did they share technologies and traditions? Or did different groups independently develop similar solutions to the challenges of desert life? The answers remain uncertain. The story of the Baal cycle began in 1928 when a farmer near the Mediterranean coast of modern Syria accidentally uncovered an ancient tomb while ploughing his field. The discovery led archaeologists to the nearby ruins of Ugarit, a powerful Bronze Age city that had been buried and forgotten for more than 3,000 years. Excavations soon revealed palaces, temples, royal archives, and thousands of clay tablets. Among these discoveries was a collection of texts now known as the Baal cycle, one of the most important mythological records ever found in the ancient Near East. These tablets offered a rare glimpse into the beliefs of a civilization that vanished during the Great Bronze Age collapse and exposed a series of mysteries that scholars are still trying to understand today. Ugarit flourished between roughly 1450 and 1200 BCE as a wealthy trading kingdom connecting Egypt, Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and the Levant. Merchants from across the ancient world passed through its harbour, making the city one of the region's most important cultural crossroads. Yet despite its significance, Ugarit disappeared so completely that its name vanished from memory. When archaeologists uncovered its archives, they found something unexpected. The tablets were written in a unique alphabetic cuneiform script, containing only around 30 symbols. At a time when neighbouring civilizations relied on writing systems containing hundreds of signs, Ugarit had developed one of the earliest known alphabet-based scripts. The question remains how such a remarkably simple system emerged and whether it helped influence later alphabets used throughout the Mediterranean world. The most famous texts discovered at Ugarit tell the story of Baal, the storm god worshipped throughout much of the ancient Levant. At first glance, the story appears to be mythology, but many researchers believe it may preserve deeper memories of environmental disasters, political struggles, and the way ancient people understood the forces shaping their lives. The narrative begins with a challenge from Yam, the god of the sea. Yam seeks authority over the divine world and demands that Baal submit to him. Instead, Baal prepares for war. Armed with magical weapons forged by the craftsman god Kotharwakasis, he confronts Yam in a dramatic battle and ultimately defeats him. To ancient audiences, this victory represented the triumph of order over chaos, yet the symbolism is striking. For a coastal civilization dependent on trade and vulnerable to storms, the sea was both a source of wealth and a constant threat. Some scholars have suggested that the conflict between Baal and Yam may have reflected real fears of destructive storms, floods, or maritime disasters that affected Bronze Age communities. The most fascinating part of the Baal cycle comes later. After defeating Yam, Baal establishes his authority and receives a magnificent palace among the gods. His victory appears complete. Then a new enemy emerges. This adversary is Mot, the god of death. Unlike Yam, Mot cannot simply be defeated through strength. He represents drought, decay, and the unavoidable reality of death itself. According to the surviving tablets, Baal descends into the realm of Mot and disappears. The consequences are immediate. Fertility vanishes, crops fail, and the land becomes barren. Eventually, Baal returns, restoring life to the world. The story closely mirrors seasonal cycles familiar to agricultural societies, where fertile periods are followed by drought before renewal returns. Yet the mystery is larger than agriculture. Similar stories involving dying and returning gods appear across numerous ancient civilizations. Why so many cultures developed comparable narratives remains a topic of debate. Some researchers see evidence of cultural exchange, while others believe these stories emerged independently as humanity tried to explain the rhythms of nature. One reason the Baal cycle remains mysterious is that the tablets were not found intact. Many survived only as broken fragments scattered throughout the ruins. Scholars spent decades translating and reconstructing the text piece by piece. Even today, important sections are missing. Entire passages may never be recovered, leaving gaps in the story that continue to generate competing interpretations. Some details about the gods, the sequence of events, and the original meaning of certain passages remain uncertain. Every newly discovered fragment has the potential to alter long-standing theories about the text. As excavations expanded throughout the 20th century, archaeologists uncovered far more than mythology. The archives of Ugaritic contain diplomatic correspondence, trade records, legal agreements, and administrative documents. These texts revealed a kingdom deeply connected to the major powers of its era. Among the most dramatic discoveries were letters written during the city's final years. Several messages suggest that enemy forces were approaching while Ugaric's defences were weakened. The tone of these documents is urgent and desperate. They read almost like warnings sent in the final moments before disaster struck. These letters have become some of the most chilling records from the end of the Bronze Age because they appear to capture a civilization witnessing its own collapse in real time. The destruction of Ugaritic remains one of archaeology's greatest unsolved mysteries. Around 1200 BCE, the city was destroyed and never rebuilt. Archaeological evidence confirms a sudden catastrophe, but the exact cause remains unknown. Some historians blame the mysterious Sea Peoples, groups often associated with widespread destruction across the eastern Mediterranean. Others point to earthquakes, famine, economic collapse, or a combination of multiple disasters occurring simultaneously. Whatever happened, Ugaritic vanished during a period when several major civilizations collapsed within only a few decades. Trade networks disappeared, kingdoms fell, and entire regions entered centuries of decline. The fall of Ugaritic became part of a larger historical mystery that scholars are still attempting to solve. Perhaps the most surprising aspect of the Baal cycle is how much influence a forgotten civilization may have had on later traditions. The tablets contain themes that appear repeatedly throughout the ancient Near East: divine councils, cosmic battles between order and chaos, storm gods wielding immense power, and struggles against forces represented by the sea or death. These similarities have led researchers to investigate how stories and religious ideas travelled between neighbouring cultures. Rather than existing in isolation, Ugaritic appears to have been part of a much larger network of shared myths and beliefs stretching across the ancient world. More than 3,000 years after the city was destroyed, the Baal cycle remains one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries ever made. It preserves the voice of a civilization that vanished from history and reveals how its people understood life, death, nature, and the universe around them. The greatest mystery is not whether Baal truly existed, but how an entire religious tradition that once influenced millions could disappear so completely that only broken clay tablets remained. Buried beneath the ruins of a lost city, these fragments survive the collapse of kingdoms, the rise of empires, and thousands of years of silence before finally telling their story again. Today, the Baal cycle stands as both a mythological masterpiece and a reminder that some of history's most important civilizations can vanish so thoroughly that only archaeology can bring them back to life.